Milliken Group 2, which includes Kindwin Crespin, Migdalia O, and Landon Dean. The title of our presentation is The Impact of Research and Development and Capital Expenditures on Financial Performance. Every year, the Magnificent Seven collectively spend hundreds of billions of dollars on research and development and capital expenditures. The question we set out to answer is, does that spending actually translate into stronger financial performance and/or higher stock prices? In order to investigate this, we structured our analysis around 4 key research questions. Question 1, do companies with higher R&D intensity see stronger revenue growth? Question 2, does the market reward R&D spending or capital expenditures more? Question 3, which company generates the most profit per dollar of combined investment? And question 4, whose profitability is the most stable? These 4 questions form the backbone of our analysis, which will be covered in the upcoming slides. To cover the data source and model, our analysis is built on fiscal year end fundamentals and share price data from Yahoo Finance covering all 7 companies. Those 7 companies include Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Alphabet, Meta, NVIDIA, and Tesla across 6 fiscal years starting from 2020 through 2025. We selected Yahoo Finance specifically because it standardizes financial reporting across companies rather than reconciling 7 different 10K formats from each individual company's website. We worked from a single consistent source instead. One limitation I want to note is our price data is year-end only, meaning it captures price return rather than total return, which means dividends are not included. Beyond the raw figures, we incorporated 3 calculated measures directly into the model: CapEx intensity, net margin, and R&D intensity, so that the ratio logic is centralized and consistently calculated across all 3 of us.
Our first research question, we compared the last 3 years. Our research question was whether companies that spent more on research and development had stronger revenue growth. R&D is the money that companies invest in creating new products, improving technology, and developing new ideas. In this chart, each point represents one company. The horizontal axis shows how much of its revenue the company spends on R&D, and the vertical axis shows its revenue growth over the last 3 years. Looking at the results, we didn't find a clear relationship between the 2. For example, Meta spent the highest percentage of its revenue in R&D, but NVIDIA had the highest revenue growth. Other companies with similar R&D spending had very different growth results. Overall, we found that spending more on R&D doesn't automatically lead to higher revenue growth. While R&D helps companies develop new products and technologies, our results suggest that it isn't the only factor that influences revenue growth. Our second research question, we examined whether stock market rewards companies that invest more in research and development compared to capital expenditures, also known as CapEx. In this chart, the light blue bars represent each company's R&D intensity, the dark blue bars represent CapEx intensity, and the orange line shows the average year-end stock price over the 3 years from fiscal years 2023 through 2025. Looking at the results, we didn't find a clear relationship between investment intensity and stock price. Meta invested the highest percentage of its revenue in R&D, while Microsoft invested the most in CapEx. However, companies with similar investment levels had very different average stock prices. This also highlights that companies have different investment strategies, so it's not just about how much they invest, but how those investments align with their business model and long-term objectives. Overall, our analysis suggests there was no clear winner between R&D and CapEx investment. From the data we gathered, there is no correlation between increased investment intensity and stock price, indicating that investment level alone does not explain stock market performance. For our third question, we looked at which company generates the most profit per dollar invested. So the chart compares each company's profit generated for every dollar invested in research and development and capital expenditures. A higher value means the company is generating more profit from its investments. Looking at the results, NVIDIA generated the highest profit per dollar invested, making it the most investment efficient company in our analysis. Apple ranks second, while Microsoft and Alphabet showed moderate investment returns. Amazon generated the lowest on investment. Overall, our analysis showed that companies can generate very different returns on their investment. During the last 3 years, NVIDIA generated the highest profit per dollar invested, while Amazon generated the lowest.
Thank you, Magnolia. So, building on everything my team has already covered about investment levels, efficiency, and volatility, our final question looks at which company's profitability is actually the most stable. On this slide, we're measuring stability using the standard deviation of net margin from 2023 to 2025. A lower standard deviation means that a company's profitability is more consistent year over year. What we found is that Microsoft and Apple are clear leaders in stability, both with extremely low net margin volatility. Their business models are diversified, mature, and generate predictable returns regardless of how much they had spent on R&D and CapEx. Companies like Amazon, Alphabet, Meta, and Tesla fall somewhere in the middle range, not unstable, but definitely more variable. Their margins move more noticeably. And then there's NVIDIA, which stands out again. Just like we saw earlier, NVIDIA delivers the strongest returns per dollar invested, but it also had the highest volatility by a wide margin. Its net margin standard deviation is more than triple that of Tesla, and far beyond the rest of the group. This reinforces the point my teammates had made. Efficiency-driven returns can be powerful, but they often come with concentration risk and potentially greater instability. So the takeaway from this final question is that strong performance and stable performance are not always the same thing. Companies like Microsoft and Apple achieve that stability through their diversified business models, while NVIDIA's exceptional efficiency comes with much higher swings in profitability. When evaluating long-term investment strategy, both sides of that trade-off may matter to you. On this slide, I created an animated scatter chart. As this animation plays, you'll see each company's bubble move into place based on two things: their 3-year rolling net margin stability on the horizontal axis and the average net margin on the vertical axis. The size of the dot is equated with the company's revenue. What becomes clear right away is that Microsoft and Apple settle far to the left with very small movement. Their bubbles barely shift, showing extreme profit stability. These line up with what our team had mentioned earlier. These companies have diversified business models that generate these consistent returns. As the other bubbles animate, you'll notice Amazon, Alphabet, Meta, and Tesla forming that middle cluster. Their margins fluctuate more year to year. And then as the animation highlights, NVIDIA, you can clearly see the biggest movement. NVIDIA lands with one of the highest average margins, but also the highest volatility. This visually reinforces that point we had made earlier. NVIDIA's efficiency is exceptional. But when it comes to concentration risk, their profitability swings more because so much of their business depends on supplying GPUs and capital-intensive companies like Microsoft and Amazon. So the key takeaway from this animation is that strong returns and stable returns are not the same thing. I like this chart because it really tells the story pretty clear. Microsoft and Apple are slow and steady, with stable profitability, while NVIDIA really stands out against the crowd as the obvious outlier, with much bigger swings in its margins.
So what does the analysis tell us? Investment level and mix alone do not predict financial performance, and what actually drives higher stock price and revenue is conversion efficiency and business model, which means how effectively a company can turn its spending into a return on investment or overall results. NVIDIA illustrates this clearly as it generates the strongest returns of any company in our data set, but also the least stable. This is a direct consequence of its position in the market as the primary GPU supplier to capital-intensive companies like Microsoft and Amazon. NVIDIA's performance is closely tied to the demands of a concentrated customer base. This means NVIDIA is less diversified than the other companies. Its primary revenue source is GPU and acting as a supplier to the demand side companies such as Microsoft and Amazon, who are actually more diversified as far as business model and revenue streams. That leads us to our central conclusion: efficiency-driven returns cannot be evaluated in isolation. They must be weighed against concentration risk when assessing long-term investment strategy. Strong performance and stable performance are not the same thing and drive different results. And that distinction has real implications for how these companies should be viewed as long-term investments.